The day my own daughter looked me in the eyes and quietly said, "Dad, we just can't afford your $22 insulin anymore," something inside me broke. I nodded, smiled, and told her not to worry. That same evening, I watched her surprise her mother-in-law with a brand new $75,000 luxury SUV. Everyone clapped. Cameras flashed. I stood in the corner pretending to be happy while wondering how my life had become worth less than a monthly tank of gas. If you enjoy emotional family stories with powerful twists and meaningful life lessons, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. And before we continue, I'd like you to know the pictures shown throughout this video are creative visual dramatizations inspired by this story. They are not real photographs from my family's life. My name is James Carter. I'm 71 years old, and diabetes has been part of my life for almost 20 years. My late wife Margaret always made sure I never missed a single dose. After she passed away, everything became harder. I learned to cook alone, take my medicine alone, and face every doctor's appointment alone. The only thing that kept me going was believing my daughter Emily still cared about me the way her mother would have wanted. When Emily married Ryan, I welcomed him like my own son. I never wanted him to feel like an outsider. I helped them with the down payment on their first home and even paid several of Ryan's business bills when times became difficult. I never asked for anything in return. A parent gives because love doesn't keep score. At least that's what I believed. Last Friday, I quietly mentioned that my insulin prescription needed to be refilled before the weekend. Emily lowered her eyes and softly explained that money was tight. Ryan nodded and said they had too many bills to handle right now. I smiled and told them I'd manage somehow. Later that evening, they invited me to dinner at Ryan's mother's house. I almost declined, but Emily insisted. During dessert, everyone walked outside. A huge red bow sat on top of a brand new luxury SUV parked in the driveway. Ryan handed the keys to his mother while everyone cheered. Emily hugged her and said, "You deserve the very best." I quietly stepped away before anyone noticed the tears filling my eyes. That night I cut my insulin dose in half, hoping it would last a little longer. 2 days later, my phone rang. Ryan's mother asked if I could stop by her house alone because she had something important that no one else could know. I drove to Ryan's mother's house the next afternoon with 100 questions running through my mind. Linda had always treated me kindly, but we were never especially close. When she opened the door, she didn't greet me with her usual smile. Instead, she looked over both shoulders, quietly locked the door behind me, and asked me to sit at the kitchen table. Her face looked heavy with guilt. Before saying another word, she placed a small wooden box in front of me. It was locked with a tiny brass key tied to the handle by a faded blue ribbon. In a trembling voice, she whispered, "James, please don't open this until Ryan and Emily leave for their business trip tonight. Promise me." I looked into her eyes and realized she was frightened. I gave her my word. The drive home felt longer than ever. That little wooden box rested on the passenger seat beside me the entire way. I wanted to unlock it immediately, but I couldn't break the promise I had just made. All afternoon, I kept wondering what could possibly be inside. My heart told me it wasn't money or jewelry. It was something much heavier than that. That evening, Emily called to say they would be away for 2 days meeting potential investors. She sounded cheerful, asking if I was feeling okay. I lied and said everything was fine. I couldn't bring myself to tell my own daughter that I had been stretching my insulin because I didn't want to become another burden. Around 8 that night, I watched their car disappear down the street. My hands were already shaking, partly from my blood sugar and partly from fear. I carried the wooden box to my dining table where Margaret and I used to drink coffee together every evening. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. Finally, I untied the ribbon, turned the tiny brass key, and slowly lifted the lid. Inside wasn't cash or expensive jewelry. There was a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Linda's handwriting. Beneath it rested several bank statements, copies of vehicle purchase documents, and a flash drive carefully labeled, "Show this to James first." My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it. I opened the envelope first. Linda's letter started with words I never expected to read. "James, if you're reading this, it means I could no longer stay silent about what your daughter and my son have been hiding from you." Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed attorney Michael Harris. The moment I answered, he quietly said, "James, whatever is inside that box, don't throw anything away. I'll be at your house within the hour." My heart was racing as I unfolded Linda's letter. The first line made my hands tremble so badly that I had to place the paper on the table. She wrote that she could no longer live with the guilt. She explained that the luxury SUV had never been her idea. Ryan insisted on buying it to impress business partners and make his family appear successful. Linda argued with him, reminding him that I needed my insulin, but he refused to listen. Even worse, Emily knew exactly where the money had gone. Reading those words felt like losing my daughter all over again. I kept asking myself where I had failed as a father. Had I raised her to believe appearances mattered more than people? A few minutes later, attorney Michael Harris arrived carrying his laptop. I handed him the flash drive with shaking hands. Together, we watched several saved emails, bank transfers, and text messages appear on the screen. Every payment matched the purchase of the luxury SUV. Then another document appeared that neither of us expected. It showed money from a savings account I had created years earlier for Emily's future. I had added her name only so she could help me if I ever became too sick to manage my finances. Instead, thousands of dollars had quietly disappeared over the past several months. Michael looked at me with deep concern and softly asked if I had ever approved those withdrawals. I slowly shook my head. Tears rolled down my face, but they weren't only tears of anger. They were tears of disappointment. I remembered teaching Emily to ride a bicycle, cheering at her school plays, and promising her mother that I would always protect our little girl. Somehow that little girl had become someone I barely recognized. I still loved her with every part of my heart, but love could no longer erase the truth sitting in front of me. Michael gently placed a hand on my shoulder and reminded me that honesty sometimes hurts before it heals. Just as we finished reviewing the final document, another message appeared on the laptop. It had been scheduled months earlier by Linda. Attached was a signed affidavit and copies of every conversation she had secretly recorded after realizing Ryan planned to keep hiding the truth. Michael quietly closed the computer and looked straight at me. "James," he said, "this evidence changes everything. Tomorrow morning, your daughter and Ryan are coming home expecting another normal day. They have no idea the truth is already waiting for them." I barely slept that night. I wasn't thinking about the money anymore. I was thinking about my little girl. I remembered holding Emily the day she was born and promising Margaret that I would always love her, no matter what happened. That promise hadn't changed. But love doesn't mean pretending the truth doesn't exist. Sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is face the child they would do anything to protect. The next morning, attorney Michael Harris arrived before Emily and Ryan returned. A few minutes later, their car pulled into my driveway. Emily walked inside smiling, but her expression disappeared the moment she saw Michael sitting at my kitchen table. Ryan immediately noticed the wooden box and froze. Michael calmly placed the bank records, purchase documents, and Linda's signed affidavit in front of them. No one raised a voice. No one argued. The evidence spoke for itself. Ryan finally admitted he had convinced Emily that buying the luxury SUV would help his business image and attract wealthy clients. Emily broke down in tears and confessed she knew I needed insulin, but she kept believing they would replace the money before I ever found out. Instead, every lie became bigger than the last. Then the front door quietly opened. Linda walked in carrying my insulin prescription and several months' worth of medication. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and apologized for not stopping her son sooner. She admitted she had secretly paid for my prescription the day she learned I had been cutting my doses in half. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. At that moment, I realized kindness sometimes comes from the person you least expect. Ryan lowered his head and accepted responsibility. Emily held my hands, crying harder than I had ever seen, begging me to forgive her for forgetting the values her mother had taught her. I forgave my daughter because forgiveness frees the heart, but I also made it clear that trust must be earned again through actions, not promises. Ryan agreed to repay every dollar that had been taken and accepted the legal consequences of his decisions. Weeks later, Emily began visiting every weekend, not with expensive gifts, but with groceries, home-cooked meals, and genuine time together. Slowly, our family started healing because truth had finally replaced deception. As I took my full insulin dose that evening, I looked at Margaret's photograph and quietly thanked her for teaching me that love should never come before honesty. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment because your words may remind another family to value their parents before it's too late. Share this story with someone who believes no mother or father should ever have to choose between medicine and family. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. Remember, money can buy luxury, but only love, respect, and truth can keep a family together.